Hello, everybody. It's Mark with 318 Insurance here in Shreveport, Louisiana, and wanted to continue talking about some insurance topics today. I'm going to change directions a little bit. Most of what we put out here has been Medicare oriented, but this time we're going to talk about a different topic, and it's long-term care planning. This is a issue that is near and dear to my heart. I've been affected by it personally with my family, and have had a lot of clients that we've walked down this road over the years. Have some that are currently dealing with long-term care issues right now. But I wanted to spend the time today just talking about what long-term care is, and where does it fit in the insurance landscape. So first is what is long-term care? Well, long-term care needs are simply a natural part of the aging process. When we grow to a point in our lives where we cannot do everything we need to do without assistance, then we need assistance, we need help. And that's what long-term care planning is. And it's important to understand that, they've gone in and determined that there are usually about 6 different activities of daily living that are necessary for somebody to function. And they have to do with being able to transfer from like a bed to a chair, being able to walk, being able to cook for yourself, being able to bathe, incontinence is one of them, being able to feed yourself. Those are activities of daily living, or someone who's just suffering from a cognitive impairment like dementia or Alzheimer's. All of those are part of the long-term care landscape. And when you have those issues, then that's when you need assistance with those activities of daily living. That's where this really comes in. And, a lot of people, whether you're a child of an older individual or whether you are that aging individual, you look at it from a standpoint of who's going to provide that assistance to me. And, as a child, we want to be able to take care of our parents, and if you look at the landscape of 100 years ago, it was very natural when a parent was getting to the point of aging, to a point where they couldn't take care of all those activities of daily living, they would simply move in with the child. And that was a very natural thing. It happened in my family with my grandmother. She had some medical issues. She was getting to the point where she couldn't take care of herself. We took her into our home, and she lived with us for a while. And that was a natural thing. Some people still do that today. And that's a great thing. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The issue comes in to the impacts of those decisions. And if you're completely relying on that decision, sometimes there is potentially a financial burden to that. There's a physical burden to that. There's also an emotional burden to that. One of the things that I've recognized is that the actual care that somebody needs is sometimes more than that individual can give. In our society, we've got, and this is a negative on most of the men out there, of which I am one. Men are not great about taking care of things like this. It usually falls to a daughter, a niece, someone like that, a granddaughter. And the physical limitations of that sometimes are more than that individual can bear. And so you need to recognize that as a potential issue out there. The second thing is just that emotional burden. It is very difficult to want to give somebody the care, but you not physically know or understand how to do that in the best way. Not everybody has got a nurse in their family, which I'm fortunate enough to be able to have as my wife, but that capability of really providing that care is sometimes a very difficult thing to do. And that can drain on somebody emotionally if you know you're not giving quite the level of care that that person needs. The last thing is the financial burden of that. As we look at our society, we've got more and more two-income families. The women are in the workplace as much as men are just about. We got a sandwich generation where we're dealing with our children and with our aging parents. So all of those things, is it economically feasible for you to quit your job simply to take care of this individual? And as much as you want to be able to do that, sometimes that just cannot happen. So we need to recognize that that is the burden that we're dealing with here. And when you're an older individual that's going through that process, that you need that type of care, are you going to look down on your family members because they are not physically providing that care for you? I think that there's been a change in mindset to say, hey, if you can get me that care, that's just as much caring as you physically doing it yourself. And so there's just a change of mindset that we've had over the years. And then we also need to recognize that not everybody is going to go through that process of needing that long-term care assistance. There are a lot of things medically, whether it be like a heart attack or a stroke or something like that. People will die without ever having to need that type of care. It happens. There's accidents, there's car accidents, there's all types of things out there that can take somebody and go ahead and take them, and have them pass without having to have necessarily a long-term care plan in place. The problem is that we don't know how that end of life is going to happen. And because of that, we have to prepare simply for the prospects of what could potentially happen out there. And it does happen more often than not. So let's really talk about what those risks are from a financial standpoint. The problem is this is a very costly endeavor. When you're sitting there talking about going into needing care and needing 24/7 assistance, doing all kinds of things, whether that be in assisted living, whether that be in a nursing home, or whether that even is at home, that is a very large financial burden. And if the financial risk is large, I will tell you from experience that in our area, which is probably one of the least costly areas to have this type of care in the entire country, it still costs $60,000 to $80,000 for a year for somebody to be able to stay in that nursing home or that assisted living facility. And like I said, that's a very low cost area of the country. Sometimes it's 2 and 3 times higher than that, depending on where you live and so forth. So what a lot of people do is they simply go to the point where they just let the state take care of them. And there is a Medicaid program out there. That Medicaid spend down program is out there. You can eventually get those benefits from the state. There's a couple of problems with that, though. You need to recognize that these are the issue. The first problem is that you have to spend down and deplete your asset base before the state will come in. You've worked hard for this, so you don't want to necessarily see it all go away, because there might be things that you want to leave as a legacy, whether that's to your kids, to your grandkids, to a charity. Whatever those desires that you have are basically gone at that point in time. And there is a huge issue with the generational wealth transfer that is becoming a problem because of the lack of long-term care planning. And that's one of the things, is you deplete your asset base. That's first off. The second thing is that once you go onto the Medicaid program, you have very little control of where you actually get to stay. And I don't know if you've been in any of these facilities lately. Some of them are very good. Some of them aren't. There is a requirement if a nursing home or assisted living is going to take Medicaid dollars, they have to put 10% of their beds up for Medicaid pay patients. The problem is that the Medicaid paid patients fill up those rooms because there's so many of them. The private pays take up the other rooms. If there's not room in the facility you want to go to, all they are required to do is to put you within 30 miles of your home. That could be the next town away. It could be in a different county or parish. Louisiana, we have parishes. But it could be a significant distance from where your family is. And that's an important thing. The third thing that's a problem with that situation is Medicaid is running out of money. Medicaid simply does not have the funds to pay for these types of services for everybody who might need them. What that does from a societal standpoint is it causes every single one of us to have a higher tax bill every year. And that quality of care is going to go down when the money is not there to pay for those individuals. So if you want to really impact your family in a negative way, well, if you don't protect your asset base and then you also force them into a higher tax situation so that the community can take care of them, or the state in this case, then you are putting a double burden on them. And so looking at that, I think it's important to recognize that those are issues out there. The other thing to realize is that other insurance products do not take care of this, whether it be a life insurance product with certain stipulations there. There's some life insurance that can have an impact on this. I'm not going to say it's a huge impact, but it could have an impact on it. But your Medicare does not cover any of this. And you say, well, I remember that Aunt Sue was in the nursing home and she was getting that paid for partially by Medicare. Well, that would only have been in a non-custodial situation. That would have been while she was in a rehab and she was assigned to their rehab unit. Custodial care is what we're dealing with, and this is taking care of everything outside of her actual medical needs. The medical needs are taken care of through Medicare, however you take care of that Medicare issue, but then the custodial needs are not taken care of by Medicare. So it's important to understand that. Some people have some ancillary products out there. They might have a cancer policy. That's fine and great. You might have a $25,000 benefit on a cancer policy. Well, if you go in without a cancer diagnosis into long-term care needs, then you don't have that money to be able to deal with that either. So realize that there is no other insurance that really deals with this, except for different types of long-term care insurance products. And there's a couple of them out there. But really what I want to talk about today is I really want to talk about the nature and the landscape of the long-term care industry, because it's changed a lot over the last 15 years. And I remember this from when I first started learning about long-term care. The guy that taught me more about this than anybody else was the guy who was out of Seattle, Washington. He said he got into this business simply because he was a nursing home administrator. And he was a nursing home administrator for 13 years. What he said was it was amazing to know the number of people that were in that facility that he was managing the day he left, that were there the day he got there. And that is what drove him to realize that this was something that he was passionate about. And I think it's important to recognize that. And we all have stories. I've got a whole lot of different stories about how long-term care planning has positively impacted people. And never really hear negative impacts of that. It's always a positive impact when you have somebody that does this planning. 11% of adults that are over age 65 have actual long-term care coverage. Now, there's a large swath of the population that just doesn't have that much income and assets. They would naturally be aligned towards that Medicaid program. But if you said half of the population was like that, that's still a very large chunk. 11% out of 50% is still 1/5 of the eligible population that does not have planning for this. The second thing is, or 11%, 1/5 do have planning, or maybe it's 40% do, but not that many have that planning for this. You have a larger population that doesn't have this planning than does. The numbers are basically this: 52% of people who are over the age of 65 will need these types of services at some time in their life. That's a very glaring prospect, and I think that number is actually growing because of medical technology and how long people can live with debilitating conditions. 57 is the average age that people have been buying long-term care policies. I think that is a problem, because when you get into that demographic of 57-year-olds, You're going to be looking at a lot of people who aren't going to be able to qualify medically for these policies. In fact, 22% of the applicants between age 50 and 59 are declined for coverage. And those aren't the total population of those that are 50 to 59. That's only the ones that have applied. Okay. So there's a lot of people that just know they couldn't get it from an underwriting standpoint and don't even try. So let's just take those numbers. That's one-fifth of those that go in at that point in time. And then you look at age 60 to 69, 30% do not get qualified. They're declined as well. So you've got, as you age, you typically develop more conditions. That's a problem. And so these are people that are wanting long-term care. These aren't people that have just dismissed it totally. These are the people that actually want it. And they say, okay, I'm going to try to get this. And you've got between 50 and 57, you got roughly 25 or so % of the population that cannot get those. 50 and 70. In 2002, or excuse me, in 2000, there were 125 different insurance companies that were writing this type of product. By 2016, that number had shrunk to 17. There's a lot of transition in this market. There's a lot of companies that have gotten out of this business. This is important to realize. I think that number is actually lower today than it was then. There are several carriers that have, since 2016, gotten out of this business. In 2002, there were 750,000 policies that were sold. In 2018, which is 6 years ago, there was only 56,000 policies sold. So you see that, and that's with a growing population. That's with more and more people potentially in need for this. You're seeing less people buy it. And I think that that poses a big problem in our society when you look at that. Just between 2017 and 2018, there was a 13% drop in the number of policies that were sold. This is an issue that not only does it affect our families, but it also affects our whole society. When you look at this in those stark terms and see those numbers, you start to realize that this is a huge issue. It's an issue to the point where Medicaid in a lot of states, including our state, has started to go back and do what's called recovery. For years, if Medicaid paid it out, it was just it was a done deal. They paid it out and it was over. 20 years ago, they started doing this in California because there was a huge burden on the system. And now it's progressed to a lot of other states, but they're going back. Once that individual has passed, they tallied up what the cost of that individual's care was that they paid out. They go back to the family to recoup that. And there's certain assets that they can attach to try to recoup those assets. And it's important to recognize that they're being forced to do this because they're strapped for cash. They've got a huge liability out there that they put on themselves, that we've put on them. And then they are trying to figure out how to do this. Planning is what is important. And I'm going to tell you that whatever day that you start seeing the urge that this is something that is important for you, that's the day you need to start planning. If it's at 35 or 40, that's good. If it's at 65 or 70, you can't go back and relive part of your life. You have to go from where you're at right there. So this is an issue that you need to talk about. Now, there's several different ways, and we're going to talk about all those different ways that you can potentially deal with this liability and this issue. Traditional long-term care insurance is one of them. It fits a certain demographic of folks. Asset-based long-term care is another one. It fits a certain demographic of folks. Chronic illness benefit riders on life insurance policies are potential options for some people, or a combination of those. So there are things that we can do to do this planning. It's not simply buying a policy. It's actually going through a process of looking at the risk and evaluating that risk, looking at the resources, and that resource is not just financial, it's also what's your health. How are you, because you buy this with your health. When you start looking at all those things, we develop a plan. That is what's important, and that's the main message that I want to get over to you today. So hopefully this has been valuable to you. There's a whole lot more on long-term care that we're going to discuss. It is a passionate area of mine. Our agents are focused on this as well. We are trying to take care of our people. So if you like this video, we would appreciate it. Subscribe to our page, pass it around, send it to your friends. If you need anything from us, if you want to start that conversation, call us, 318-629-3777. Or get on our website, 318insurance.com. We've got some resources there, and we're redoing our webpage, so we're building that out with some new material. So it's a work in progress, but we do have capabilities of you getting a little bit of information there. But we want to start that conversation with you so that we can help you through this part of your planning process. I hope you have a great day. God bless.